The hardest part about stopping work at 58 usually isn't the spreadsheet, it's the silence around the decision. No one taps you on the shoulder and says, "You've done enough." No statement arrives in the mail telling you that another year of work is optional. So, like most, you keep working, not because it's a clear decision, but because stopping feels like a decision you've never officially allowed yourself to make. And that's what makes working past 58 so difficult. On paper, it can look responsible, even safe. But without the right framework, you may never know whether you're protecting your retirement or giving up years you didn't need to give up. I'm Taylor Demars, third generation retirement planner and CFP. And in this video, I'm going to walk you through the 3 tests that determine whether stopping at 58 is actually possible, whether the money works, whether another year is worth what it costs, and whether you know what you're retiring into. Let's get into it. I want to tell you about a couple I worked with I'll call Dan and Linda. He's 58, saved well, their home is paid off, and by every number on a spreadsheet, he's already won the game. Linda's 56, she stepped away from work full time about a year and a half ago, and she's already been building her next chapter. Pickleball Tuesdays, full afternoons with the grandkids, and a calendar that has space in it. She's at peak energy, and what she's hoping for, quietly and patiently, is that Dan will join that empty space with her in it. Not just to retire from work, but retire into something with her. The trips that they've been talking about for years, attending all their grandkids' soccer games, the slower mornings together that aren't focused on a clock. But Dan wasn't burnt out at his job. He doesn't hate it either. He's just still there, telling himself another year of bonus, another year of compounding, another year of working is just to be safe and responsible. Meanwhile, Lindo had been watching him carry a weight he may not had to anymore. If you're anywhere close to their situation, you might already know this tension across spouses. What eventually happens with someone in Dan's spot is the decision isn't made deliberately, but by circumstance, be it a layoff, a health scare, be it their own or a spouse's, an aging parent who suddenly needs them home, something that makes the calendar feel a lot less negotiable. In contrast, in my experience, the people who look back with the most peace are the ones who made the call to retire before circumstances made it for them. And that's what this video is about. How do you know when you are in Dan's spot? And how do you know if you can make the call on your terms while you're still in the driver's seat? So let's talk about why Dan is still working and why most people in his spot are, even when the math says they don't need to. It usually comes down to 2 feelings I hear from almost every client in their late 50s. The first is what one of my clients called cannibalizing my savings, because for 30 years, his job was to make the number go up. He watched it month after month and celebrated when it crossed milestones. His portfolio was increasing and being proof that he was doing life right. But then looking at retirement and having the idea of watching that number go down on purpose, pulling it down, withdrawing every month to month, it feels like undoing what he spent 3 decades building. Not like retirement, but cannibalization. The second feeling I see is what I call the compounding trap. It tends to show up when somebody is within a year or 2 of that next bonus vesting schedule or watching their portfolio compound harder than it ever has. The market's been good. The account's been at an all-time high. And now they look at it and say, why would I walk away now? The money's coming in faster than ever, and it feels like I'm leaving chips on the table. Both feelings are completely understandable, but they're both based on watching the wrong account. For 30 years, Dan had been obsessively tracking that one number, the balance of his 401k. Every quarter, every year, it's like his report card or scoreboard, proof he's doing it right. I like to account for this second type of account that matters just as much, maybe more, starting in your late 50s. It's not when you log into or you get a statement for, and most planning conversations don't name it directly. You've heard of the term lifespan, how long you'll live. Maybe health span, how many of those years you'll be in good health. Both are useful, but there's a third one that matters more for you making this decision, and almost nobody talks about it. I call it your wealth span. Wealth span is your ability to use your wealth while you have your health. The years where you have enough in the account to fund the life you want and enough in the body to actually go and live it. Where the passport still gets used, where the hike is still fun, not painful, where you can still get off the floor from you playing with your grandkids and get up without groaning. Because every year you wait to retire removes one of the youngest, healthiest, most flexible years you have left. And those years aren't all created equal. The financial account may be growing faster than ever, but the life account is quietly shrinking too. Here's what this looks like in practice. Say you always want to go slow travel in Italy. At 58, that trip is an exciting, mentally engaging challenge. You're sharp, you're walking 10 miles a day, exploring every neighborhood on foot, and easily handling the logistics. At 68, the mental load gets tougher, and you're opting for taxis and shorter, more structured tours, probably to manage the joint pain. Fast forward to age 75, that trip turns into perhaps a luxury river cruise that touches on the sights but misses the immersive, active experience you dreamed of. It's the same dream, different body. That's WealthSpan. And the reason nobody's told you about it is simple. Most planning tools are built around what they can easily measure: dollars, returns, distributions, projections. WealthSpan is harder to quantify, so it gets left out of the conversation. But once you see this account sitting next to your 401k, the decision changes, which is why there are actually three tests that actually determine whether stopping at 58 is possible, whether the money works, whether another year of working is worth what it costs, and whether you know what you're retiring into. So let's break it down. The first test is financial readiness. Can the life you actually want be supported without another year of work? And this is more than just checking a number on a statement, because for our clients, we address this through a process we call the Retirement Readiness Roadmap. It's a structured way of looking at the 5 planning pillars, being income, taxes, investments, estate planning, and healthcare planning. Each of those affects the others. Your tax strategy shapes how much you can actually spend, your healthcare plan affects how much you need to set aside, and your investment plan determines whether you can survive a bad market in year 2. And your estate plan protects everything you built. Skip any one of them and the whole picture starts to wobble. And this is why I want to be honest about what this looks like in practice. Done right, we don't see it as a one-meeting exercise. This roadmap takes 3 months to build out properly with multiple meetings, pieces, iterations, and then of course you want to update your plan over time as things in and out of your control change. Tax codes, market fluctuations, your health, and more. Your retirement plan isn't one you build once, it's a living thing. For many clients, we see them get stuck in the investments pillar, specifically market timing. They want to wait to retire until conditions feel just right. Our response to that is a tailored bucket income strategy that takes that question off the table. With near-term funds set aside, protected from volatility, medium-term assets that are balanced for the longer-term income needs, and the long-term money is growing. When the plan is built right, you're not picking the perfect year to retire, you're aiming to build one to survive an imperfect year. Now, when all 5 pillars are working together, the financial test can pass. The math supports the life that you want, and you don't worry about the what ifs behind it. For Dan, when we ran through all 5 pillars, the answer was already clear. He had done the work, the math was there, and the plan was solid. Which means if Dan is still at work, it's not because of the financial test is unfinished. It's because there's a second test most plans never put on the table. And for Dan, it was the test that was actually keeping him there. Because for 30 years, he wasn't just building a nest egg, he was building an identity. The VP, the provider, the guy whose calendar matters and everyone looks to make a big decision. Someone who gets the phone call late at night when something goes wrong. And that identity is stitched into him every Monday morning. Every work trip, every text from his team. When you strip that away on a random Tuesday in retirement with nowhere you have to be, who's left? Who is Dan when he's not the VP? For some people, that's the hardest transition to go into retirement, and nobody talks about it out loud because it feels small or self-indulgent or like something they should have already figured out. So they keep working instead, telling themselves that the bonuses, the market timing, waiting for one more year to settle is the reason they're there. It's an easier answer than saying, I don't know who I am without this job. But you eventually have to answer, what do I want the next 15 to 20 years to look like? And am I willing to build a plan around that instead of around a number? That's the second test, identity readiness, knowing what you're going to retire into. The third test is ones that most people don't ever put on the table, and it's one that brings together everything I've talked about so far, being your wealth span readiness. We named that concept earlier, the years where your money and your health overlap enough to actually live the life you want. But now I want to show you how we actually evaluate it. Because as you can imagine, no calculator is going to give you a precise wealth span number. But we can put real structured information around the question enough to make the trade-off visible instead of invisible. So here are the 4 inputs. The first is your personal health history, where you're starting from physically today. Like Dan, Most clients tell me they don't exercise as much as they would like. And that's actually one of the things they're most looking forward to in retirement is having time to focus on their health. The second element is your family health history. Dan's dad had cardiac issues in his early 70s. His mom is 84 and still living independently. In that context isn't a prediction, but it's a reasonable anchor for the kind of window Dan is probably working with. The third is a healthcare planning tool we offer clients. It's a health questionnaire that compares their answers to 50,000 other families in a data set to discover trends and estimate their longevity, as well as their long term care timeline. It's not a crystal ball, but it's a much more structured way to think about the next 30 years and see what it might look like for them specifically instead of guessing or ignoring the elephant in the room. The fourth input is where we actually ask you what you want to do with the years you have. Not just travel more, not just spend more time with family. We try and get really specific. What years do you want to go visit Florence? What year and what actually things do you want to do to the home renovation you've been putting off? Let me give you an example of what this looks like. Recently, I worked with a couple who were awaiting their first grandchild. Their only daughter, who lives out of state, was pregnant, and the wife told me very plainly, I want to be a full-time grandma when the time comes. So what we did was, on top of everything else in their planning, we added a specific line item for flights, travel, Airbnb stays in their daughter's city, a real funded category that would take the monthly negotiation off the table when the spouses would inevitably ask in a couple years, why are we still spending $3,000 a month on this? But the permission mattered because she was able to, when the baby came, be that full-time grandma. And that's what this fourth input does, to translate the things you actually want into the decisions you can actually make. Putting these four things together and you get an answer to the only question that really matters. Given who I am and what I'm likely facing and what I actually want, is the life I'm describing feasible with the years I have left? That's the WealthSpan Readiness. And taken together, these three tests, the financial, identity, and WealthSpan, is what we call the WealthSpan Framework. It's how we walk every client through the decision that Dan was facing. And this is the thing I wish every 58-year-old who has saved well could see on paper. Not just what another year adds to their balance sheet, but what it subtracts to their life balance sheet. On one side, you see bigger compounding, another bonus cycle, another number on your 401k statement. And on the other side, one fewer year of peak energy with your spouse, one fewer year with your grandkids while they're still little, and one fewer year where the trips you've been talking about are still easy to take. And that's the trade-off most retirement plans never put in front of you. When we showed it to Dan, the answer was self-apparent. He already won the financial game years ago, and the life supported what he and Linda wanted. And while a few more years of work would have, yes, added meaningful money to his portfolio, it wasn't forecasted to impact their lifestyle at all. Just come at the cost of something that was bigger. Dan retired at 58, and now Linda gets her wish of getting to make those adventures happen together, from European exploration to pickleball tournaments. When I talk with clients in their late 70s and 80s, people who have been working with our family firm for decades, they almost never tell me that they wish they had saved more. What I hear instead is, I wish I had spent more time with my kids when they were still young, or I wish we'd travel when we still could. These are the reasons I'm so passionate about making these memories now for people who are in your shoes and still have the power to make it happen. Because you can't buy those moments back, not for any price. If you're in your late 50s and saved well, the question you're standing in front of isn't, can I afford to stop working? It's, what am I actually waiting for? And if you keep telling yourself some version of just one more year, then the next step is to stop guessing. We can build your personalized retirement readiness roadmap to give you clarity on what your options are and the action items to make them happen. You can get started by clicking the link in the description or scanning the QR code on screen. If you're not ready for that conversation yet, the second link in the description gives you free access to the same professional planning software we use with our clients, so you can start running your own numbers tonight. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.